Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to pick a good rental property in a lower income area. And I've owned property, there was $1 million rental, and I've owned the cheapest property, which was actually $13,000 was the cheapest rental that I ever bought, right? So I've owned the full spectrum, so I know the different types of tenants that you're going to get in these properties. But if you're playing in the low income space or you're thinking of getting into low income rentals, there's a couple of things for you to know and be aware of. And the number one thing that you need to know is that the property types are going to be very different than maybe what you're used to. And the first one is, you want to go for simplicity. When I first started buying rental property in lower income areas, I'd see different properties at different prices and I didn't know how to judge it accurately. So here's an example. So you could see a really big property, maybe it was built in the early 1900s, and it would be, 2 floors and, 2,000 square feet or 2,500 square feet. And then you'd see this small little, I'd call it a shoebox with a roof, right? It was a rectangle with a roof, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, built later on maybe in the 20s, 30s, 40s. And it was maybe 800 square feet or 900 square feet. And so I would say, well, why wouldn't I get the bigger property if it's exactly the same price? And that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made early on, because I thought that getting a bigger property would be better. The truth is it's not. You really would prefer to go for a smaller property because there is less to fix. And if you've got, say, a 3-bedroom, kind of big home, the rental on that is not significantly more than the rental on the smaller property, because kind of a 3-bedroom home in an area rents for about, that price. So maybe the bigger one might give you an extra $50 a month or $100 a month, right, compared to the smaller one. But the repairs on the bigger one, because there's just so many more things to do, is a lot more than $50 to $100 a month. It's many multiples of that. So I learned very quickly that actually a simpler, smaller property is much, much better in the lower income space, because you do have certain issues with tenants in the lower income investment space that you may not have in some kind of higher income areas. And so let's say that something goes wrong, let's say that a tenant decides to damage your property or just leaves a lot of trash behind. The bigger the house, the more trash they can put. It's just the reality. Or the bigger the house, the more things can go wrong. If you have a leak at the top floor, say you've got a roof leak in a property, okay? Then you've got the roof that you've got to repair. If they haven't told you about it, now you've got the first floor and the ground floor and maybe even the basement, if that's the case, that you have to repair because of this leak. When you've got a single story, right, no basement, that's it. It's the roof leak and that's pretty much it. Maybe something on the floor, maybe. But generally speaking, the smaller the property, the better it tends to be when all the things are averaged out as far as rental income and expenses and all the rest of it. And then the other thing about it is it's a very, very quick property to turn. The number one cost when it comes to renting properties, the number one cost is tenant turns. When a tenant comes in and leaves and you have to get it ready for the next tenant. That is the biggest cost for any landlord. I mean, yes, there's other things, but generally speaking, because it's the lost time that you have, the repairs that you need to do, changing out carpet, whatever else it might be, all these things take time and money. So if you go for a smaller property, I mean, in the lower income space, my personal preference and what I've seen work the best over hundreds and hundreds of properties is something that's kind of 900 to 1,100 square feet, 1,200 square feet, and something built after World War II, right? So you want something post-48, 50s, 60s, 70s, ideally, because why? Generally speaking, the building methods and materials that they used before World War II, right, they tend to be older, and a lot of non-standard things come up in those houses. You'll get horsehair plaster, you'll get different fixtures and fittings, odd-sized doors and windows. A lot of things back then were made custom. So if you want to go to your Lowe's or Home Depot or anything like that, you're not going to find a direct replacement for many of these properties. And so because of that, it is so important from a cost standpoint and from an ease standpoint to try and pick a property that's post kind of 1948. It'll be much easier to work on, much cheaper to work on, and you'll find a direct replacement at your local hardware store. So keep these things in mind when you're looking for a property, that simplicity wins out over complexity. A newer property, it doesn't have to be brand new, but a newer property tends to be a lot easier to work on. And overall, the difference in price between a cheaper, a smaller property and a bigger property may not be much in terms of price, of purchase price, but is significantly different in terms of repair and maintenance and upkeep. And that's really where you lose as an owner. So, I've made all the mistakes, and so I'm trying to help you not to. So just think about it. Next time you see a huge property and you think, wow, I'm getting more value for money, in the long term, there's a good chance that it's going to cost you more. So I hope this helps you. See you next time.